I'm Paul Goddard, and you're listening to Ghost Hunt. Over half the population believe in ghosts, and most of us like a good ghost story. You're listening to the first part of 3 short documentaries retelling my own investigations into this fascinating subject. Tonight we hear from people whose personal experience has convinced them that there are such things as ghosts, and mediums who accept that ghosts are part of their lives. Eileen Fry, a local historian and writer, and Rosemary Harvey, a researcher, have heard many ghost stories during their inquiries. I met up with them in a cafe in Gloucester Docks, where they told me some of their favourite tales from their forthcoming book, Haunted Gloucester.
I thought you might like to hear a couple of stories we have heard from Painswick, and this one, a man told me, it was quite out of the blue. He was driving along in his car and his wife was with him, and as they turned the corner coming into Painswick, there was a row of cottages, and he saw what appeared to be a man climbing up a ladder doing some work to a thatch on one of the cottages, and he had a smock on and a funny sort of hat. And of course he put the brakes on, and as he put the brakes on, the scene just disappeared, as if he'd been dreaming and all. And his wife said to him, "Well, what made you brake them? What was the matter?" And of course he was too overcome to explain at the time, and it wasn't until he got home they sat down and he had a cup of tea. He told her exactly what he'd seen.
There's one in particular in the cloisters of the cathedral, and it concerns a man who was taking some people around and was walking around the ancient cloisters. When this chap that we know was taking some people around, he was just pointing out various things in the cathedral, and they just turned the corner around and they came to the place, the lavatorium where the monks used to wash. And running down the side of the cloister was a group of urchin boys, followed by a man wielding a stick, and this man was dressed in old military uniform, and he was chasing these boys down the cloisters, and this man stood stock still, couldn't believe what he was seeing, because they were obviously not from this century. They were probably from 2 centuries ago. They were dressed in rags and filthy, and the chap who was chasing him, they ran straight past this group of visitors and straight through the wall at the other side. This chap he was absolutely flabbergasted. He said to his friends, "Did you see that?" And of course they saw nothing. And so he kept it to himself. But later on, he sort of thought about it, and near to the cathedral there's a square called St Mary's Square, and in the past this square has been the place where people gather, a marketplace, and it was very rowdy, and stray dogs, pigs, sheep and children used to get into the cathedral, and of course this wasn't desirable. So the cathedral authorities employed people to get rid of them, and they usually employed ex-military men.
I'm sure some of you have had a paranormal experience, or most of you have spoken to someone who has. Matt Maisie and Moira Goddard tell their encounters of the unexplained.
I was riding through Quedgley Nature Reserve once, many years ago when I was younger, about 15, 16. Beautiful summer's day, coming back from a friend's house. It was an excessively hot day, I clearly remember it. coming back through, it was getting on for the evening, still not particularly chilly. Riding through, got to about the middle of the nature reserve. Suddenly the temperature really dropped, it absolutely bottomed out. And I stopped and wondered what was going on. So I had a look around and there was nothing about. I started to feel really very uneasy, almost as if somebody was kind of really watching me or something odd. Then noticed, as I was still sat on the saddle of my bike, that there was ice forming on my handlebars, which I just found so strange. And the feeling that somebody was watching me and the uneasiness got really intense to the point at which I just didn't want to be there any longer. So I'm afraid I didn't hang around to find out what was going on or who or what it could have been. I left in a bit of a hurry.
Well, I used to work for the Gloucester City Council's excavation unit. At one point, our unit was based in the Bridge Inn in Lantony Road. One day, myself and a colleague were on our own in the building, and we were at the back of the building washing pottery. Now, we were washing the pottery and then we heard footsteps outside the corridor, which I think we both looked at each other because I think subconsciously we thought, well, hang on, we didn't hear any doors open and shut. I thought, crap, who's that then? So we dashed into the next room because there was a window there that looked out on the yard, because this corridor actually was what you'd use if you wanted to go out into the yard. We looked and there was nobody there, so we thought, that's weird. So we decided we'd go and have a look around the whole building to see who it was, and we couldn't see anybody. And this was during the afternoon, so it wasn't like sort of a creepy nighttime thing.
Working once a few years ago after I left school, I started working for Debenhams in Gloucester. One evening I was working in the stock room doing some stock control. I was the only person in there. I was entirely on my own. There was an alarm on the door, so anytime anybody came in, this alarm sounded loud and you could hear it from anywhere in the stock room. So, that wasn't happening. I knew I was on my own. Got about half an hour into doing this stock movement and I started hearing the sound of a baby crying, and then the room became quite cold. And I thought, what's going on here? I'll go and have a look around and see what's happening. And I must have covered every single inch of the stock room, and I could just hear this baby crying. Very strange. It seemed to be coming from anywhere but nowhere as well. So every time I got to an area where this sound was coming from, it then moved and was somewhere else. So something was playing tricks with me. This went on for about half an hour, and I was starting to get quite unnerved by it. And then the alarm went on the door, somebody walked in, stopped, and I've never ever heard it again. Just that one moment in my life where I could hear this baby crying. It was strange, and I can only put that down to some kind of bizarre paranormal activity, because there just was no baby in that room.
It has long been reported that loved ones come back to see family or friends shortly after passing on to let them know that they're okay. Skeptics would argue that grief and longing trigger off visions and feelings that they have come back. However, people who have experienced this are completely convinced that they have been contacted. Lynn Sindri tells us her own emotional and moving story.
My brother died when he was young. He was 31, and I dreamt I was with him one night, and I was talking to him, and I was crying, and we were laughing, and I was generally with him. And then as I started to wake up, we were holding hands, and I felt his hands slowly leave my hand. And the more conscious I became, the more I felt his hand drifting away from me. And I sat up after in bed, and I was crying, but I was crying through sheer joy. He'd come back to reassure me he was okay. We were very, very close, and nobody will ever say any different. My brother was with me, and he reassured me. I'm not worried about him anymore. He really was there.
For most people who have had a paranormal experience, it's a single occurrence. However, for mediums, this happens almost every day, as they claim they can see and communicate with the spirit world. Two mediums, Sue and John Geis, of Feathers in Gloucester, told me some of their encounters.
We went to a house not far from here where they were having trouble banging at the top of the stairs and everything going on there, lots of disruption around there. We picked up the energy of an older man that was there. He was causing a lot of aggression, and by talking to him, if you like, and finding out why, what's the matter here, what's going on here, people that had moved in had actually built an extension out the back of the house. And what they'd done, they'd actually built this extension over his dog's grave. And that's why he was annoyed. That's why he was aggressive, and that's why he was causing all the problems he was. He didn't realise, if you like, that he was in another dimension. Therefore, he thought people had moved into his house with him still living there.
When I lived in a haunted house myself, by myself in West London, the spirit there was somebody called Ruby. She'd actually died in the house. I'd said to a friend of ours, Gordon, go and have a look at the decoration we made at school. And he went out and up, it's old Victorian house in its own grounds. As he looked up the stairs to the stairwell, the whole of the thing just swang violently, like it wasn't the wind. And then he saw the back of this lady going up the stairs. And later on, when he went to the toilet, it was like at the end of the hallway upstairs, just a little toilet on its own. And he just finished in the loo, and he was literally turning to open the door, and he heard these footsteps really loud coming right up to the door, and he thought, somebody wants to come in. He opened the door and there was nobody there.
We've almost come to the end of our ghost tales tonight. We've heard from mediums and ordinary people with their unexplained events. We finish off with Rosemary Harvey, who not only has researched other people's ghost stories, but has experienced something quite inexplicable herself.
When we went around Berkeley Castle, I smelled definitely wine, and it was a very strong smell of wine, and nobody else seemed to smell it. So when we went back to the information desk, I asked, is there anything in particular about this room? And she said, you mean the jester's room? I said, yes. And she said, well, that's where the men in the past congregated and drank wine after dinner. Apparently there was a very unhappy jester there who threw himself from the balcony and committed suicide.
Tune in tomorrow night and find out what Sue and John Geis sensed at the Ram Inn at Wootton-under-Edge and Woodchester Mansion.
I really heard the words, don't come here.
I felt a presence sitting in the chair over there very, very strongly.
I'd like to tell you, all you men, to get out.